30. Down here it has a section on that. I remember that situation very vividly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one of the things we do in oral history is, because we can always get access to these,
Okay.
what we don't get is the memories and experiences of the people who were there,
Right, that's
who
what
didn't write books.
Right.
So we're really more interested in hearing from you.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'll have to, I think we have this one in the library, and this one I had on the list to get, but I haven't picked it up yet.
I got in touch with the editor on the internet the other day. He left something out there, and his assistant got back to me and was apologetic about it. They miss things, you know.
It's natural.
It's natural.
Yeah, but Naval Institute Press is a little on the pricey side, so I haven't picked that one up yet. Well, did the guys explain to you how we do this?
No.
All right. Basically, what we're going to do is, I try to avoid asking questions if possible. I'd rather just, let you talk, but I'll ask some general questions just to frame things.
Sure. Is it that you want to start from basic training, or where do you want to
Well, actually, we're going to start with your life before you went into the service.
Okay.
Give me a quick little rundown on where you were born and, where you were raised and then when you went into the service. And you can take it chronologically and stop at any point that you feel like you want to go into anything in a little more detail.
Okay.
Don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the camera. Just pretty much whatever you want to talk about is good to us. And if I think there's something that we should have brought up that we didn't for some reason, I'll bring it up myself.
Okay.
But anyway, let's get started. In the way we're rolling. Okay. So the time is now 12:30 on 19 December at Latham headquarters. Interview with Mr. Ronald K. Wharton Sr. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Von Hasseln. Ron, before we go into your experiences in the military, tell me a little bit about where you were born and raised.
I was born in Amsterdam, New York in 1932, and spent all of my time there up through high school, graduated from high school. Went to work for the General Entry Company for about 6 months before I enlisted in the Navy. And that was essentially it, the early part. From then on, I enlisted, let's see, May the 4th, 1951, and I spent a week shy of 4 years, April 27th, 1955. During that time, after I finished basic training in Newport, Rhode Island, the Korean War had already started. It was pretty well into things, and the Navy was looking to fill up many warships, especially cruisers and destroyers. There was a large complex of what was referred to Com Crew Desline in Newport, Rhode Island at the time, which was the admirals in charge of this operation. I was assigned to the USS Beatty, which is one of 4 destroyers that would make up Destroyer Division 122. We, in essence, formed there in late summer of 1951, and we proceeded via the Panama Canal for degausing remove the effect of being magnetic mines against the hull. From there we proceeded to San Diego and picked up ammunition, other personnel, and it was either there or our step later on 3 South Korean intelligence officers who were very familiar where we're about to go to. We proceeded on to Pearl Harbor for about a week and did some relaxation there and picked up some more crew. From there we went to Midway, Okinawa, and then Yokosuka, Japan. From there, we within a week, we were forming two task groups. The main one was Task Force 77, which was a fast carrier task force, made up of a number of carriers, the Essex, Antietam, Valley Forge, Bonham, Richard, etc. And there were a number of cruisers that made up the second group, a task group, which was a shore bombardment group. That was made up of the cruisers, Princeton. They're named after cities. It's hard for me to remember at the time. St. Paul, Helena, etc. In addition, the big battleship at the time was Missouri, which was being relieved by the New Jersey, and we spent quite a bit of time with the New Jersey, escorting her and on shore bombardment as well as refueling and other operations. Our primary function there was to, with the two task forces, was to rescue pilots that had a ditch. They were either injured or participate in shore bombardment. As I stated a few minutes ago, we had 3 South Korean officers aboard, and once the shore bombardment proceeded something like this. We were told we were going to go into combat 2 o'clock in the morning. We were on station, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were up in Wonsan Harbor, which is quite above the 38th parallel. We proceeded to fire star shell illumination, and then opened up for about 2 or 3 hours with white phosphorus and what is sort of like flechettes now, whatever the ordnance was at the time. This type of business went on for a term of 3 or 4 months, on and off, 4 on, 4 off. And we, as a new enlisted personnel, everyone had to have their opportunity in a gun crew. And I was assigned to one of the 5-inch mounts. 5-inch being, we had three mounts that had 2 5-inch in each mount. And you either had to handle the projectile or the powder casing. The powder casing was no problem, but the projectile, you had to be a little bit careful how you handle this. It was a matter of danger in terms of the lethality of the round. And if it wasn't the first time we did this, but it was on shore bombardment, probably within a week we had an incident in the closed mount whereby we would set with a spanner wrench, we would set the projectile and pass it on into the hoist, which would go up into the breech. The mount and the powder casing would follow that. Well, it was a situation where one of our gun crew in air dropped one of the rounds. He was quite a tall person, and it sort of added to the potential danger, because at his height, the round fell right down on the steel deck, right on the tip, and proceeded to roll around in the closed mount. At that time, we all sort of jokingly laughed about it, and had a lot of 4-letter words to think and say and so forth, but not really worried about it. And the commanding officer was notified via the Babel telephone, and he advised us to get rid of the round very quickly. Someone had the presence of mind, got rid of it, and it did not go off, but it was supposed to, we were told. If it did, I probably wouldn't have been here today. We weren't particularly scared. It was just like, what's the big deal? But 20 minutes later, we all sort of turned very ashen and white and so forth. There was different incidences. I think another one that we had pilots that were injured and some were killed, and we had to retrieve the remains, and well, some very horrible situations, so forth. And we had an incident where we had to have a landing party in above the 38th parallel in one of these very strange sounding named places, and there was some activity going on there and they needed volunteers. Well, the volunteers was that type, and I was missed by one or two, but one of my friends went along. And in essence, they found some, that the North Koreans were putting some type of netting material down to prevent any landings that might come with some of our operations. Within less than, I think it was only about 700 or 800 yards offshore, where 3 machine gun nests opened up and raked the area, and the half a dozen volunteers that went, in essence, they had Thompsons and BARs, carbines, and 45 caliber pistols, and they fired. I guess they knocked out some of the machine gun crew, but it was being that they were concealed, it was very hard to do much in the whale boat going up and down. So they called back to the ship, and we just leveled the whole area. Another incident that was sort of interesting from lethality standpoint. We were quite often we would refuel. What would happen is, we'll say 2000 a particular night, you look out and all the ships are 20 miles away or whatever on the horizon, and all of a sudden the next morning you're looking up at a carrier at the flight deck and the refueling lines are going on and you're taking the fuel, or it might be from a battleship or a cruiser. It could be. This morning it happened to be from the New Jersey. We had been about a third through our refueling when the commanding officer of New Jersey told us to, well, he said break, but what he meant, disconnect the fuel lines for a short time. That we had to escort her on a shore bombardment. So our ship and one of the other ships in our division, there were 4 ships in our division: Purdy, Bristol, Hyman, and the Beatty. The Purdy escorted us along with the New Jersey, and we were proceeded to an area that the shore batteries started opening up on the battleship. There was no contest. What had happened is the shore batteries had hit one of our naval frigates quite badly, and they happened to be the commanding officer of the frigate was a close friend of the commanding officer of the New Jersey. So we were going to watch 16-inch do devastation very quickly. We were advised not to watch it, try not to watch directly, and also there might be a concussion because we were not really that far away. And we witnessed 3 salvos broadside, and it just leveled the whole hillside where these gun emplacements were. And then we just retreated and went back to refuel like nothing ever happened. These operations, the shore bombardment went on for about 3 or 4 months, I believe it was, and along with the fast care task force. When I came back to the United States stateside, when we left the operations over there, we were relieved by 4 other destroyers. And we proceeded we had a couple R&R in Japan during this 3 or 4 month period. We would go back and forth between Japan and North Korea because of the R&R. But when we finally were relieved, we left, went back to Sasebo, which is another base in Japan. From there we went to Hong Kong, and then we proceeded down through the Suez Canal to 6th Fleet headquarters and spent a couple weeks there in some operations, and visited countries in North Africa, Sicily, before we went through the Gibraltar to the Azores, where we refueled, and then we directly back to the state. We really circumnavigated the whole Earth that way. Let's see. We came back to the States and I went home on leave probably for 10 days or 2 weeks. And then we went right back into getting prepared to go overseas again. Went down to Cuba this time in Guantanamo Bay for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then come back, and then very shortly we went to the Mediterranean for different operations over there, part of the NATO agreement. Come back, short time for leave, then back to Guantanamo again, and then we went to Northern Europe, a Northern Europe cruise where we joined with NATO forces on anti-submarine warfare activity for about 3 months, working with our own submarines and destroyers, and also going through mock battles and so forth. And then we proceeded down to the Mediterranean. We came back to this country, and overall there was probably, in a span of 4 years, there's probably about 6 or 7 cruises that was pretty well used up the time. I think, although the Korean situation wasn't as deadly as the ground forces, there was a lot of strain and activity on everyone, and it needed everyone to pull together because there was not much time for anything else. And it was an experience different from anything I've ever had, and I think it sort of prepare you that if you can get through something like this, the rest is easy. After I was separated from, or rather honorably discharged from the Navy in 1955 in April, for a short time I worked for General Electric, and then I joined the Civil Service. I went to work for the Watervliet Arsenal, and I went on to college, got a baccalaureate degree, and became an electrical engineer, and we spent 30 years with the Army, pretty much, with the Benet Labs on the ordnance that was used in Vietnam and the Gulf War, too. Well, let's see, I retired in 1994, I believe it was, April 1st. Just started to get it. No, I wasn't in the Gulf, I'm sorry, I was in the Vietnam. And we had a lot of different projects to do with not just the main 120 millimeter smoothbore for the M1 Abrams tank, but we were doing work 8-inch for cruisers, and 105, 155, 120 millimeter, and also different mortar. I don't remember what the calibers are right now. I wasn't involved in any of those projects, but I was actively involved in the manufacture of the cannons. As an engineer, I had several projects that had to do with the making of these cannons. And when I say making, from forging them to having the preciseness so they could have their projected useful life and hold up when they're under firefights or whatever. And one particular project had to do with, well, when the bores are machined out, sometimes there's errors in dimensions. And there have been situations where live rounds got stuck in the breech when they're being fired due to these situations. And I had a project that actually was involved in monitoring the machine tools that remove the material and to reduce the vibration of the cutting tools. As a result, I had several papers that I presented and articles in different technical journals to do with the improvement of the ordnance there. So that's essentially, I believe, my military career, or my time with the federal government. I've been to several reunions with the ship. The ship continued on to 1970 time frame, and it obviously became obsolete, and it was sold to, I believe it was Venezuela, and went aground, and become stricken, as they said, and they scrapped it. We all felt bad. We wanted to have it like the Slater. That's the way it goes, you know. But the We're pretty active. The ship had become very active even after I left it, and I guess had been in different things over in the Arab-Israeli conflicts, many of them in the 60s. It was also involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, there's a movie coming up and with this, and I see the hull number 753, and mine was 756. I looked it up, and it's the same class Sumner. It's a USS Pierce, actually. And I don't know if it's still around, but it must be if they made the movie of it. So anyway, we visit a lot of very nice countries and try to help the people there. There a lot of devastation in the Mediterranean, even in the early 50s, countries that we had visited from World War II. Very sad. A lot of orphans, and you can see where the shore bombardment did a number there, you know. And the first commanding officer I had three of them. The first one, he was a father figure. He was probably, well, when I was 18, he was probably in his late 30s. Annapolis graduate. He had, in one of the reunions, he had passed on a year or so before. We had a nice reunion in Norfolk, right at, I guess it's General Douglas MacArthur Club or something. Really nice, you know. His wife was there, his widow, I should say. And he became a full admiral in his career, and he was the head of, he had a villa, and it was head of NATO in South Atlantic, or in the Mediterranean. So he'd really gone up, you know, and it was nice to hear that. We have our reunions every year. I don't make all of them, but I make about every other one of them. And slowly some of the people aren't around anymore, as that's the way it is, you know.
Is it a reunion of people, shipmates from the Korean War?
Korean before, we have people from the, I neglected to say, but the ship I was on was the second ship of the USS Beatty. The first one was sunk in World War II in South Africa. A German torpedo bombers sunk it, and there was about 80, about a third of the crew was lost. Survivors of that attend the reunion. Even though there's differences, different time frames, there's the bond there. And we meet when we have people that were in, we have people ranging in age from, I would say, probably in their early 40s to 85, the whole gamut. You know, those that were in World War II back to the late 60s, whatever, you know. And we meet basically every year. We pick an area. Sometimes it's in Boston, or maybe one time it was in Las Vegas. We try to have it near a military. I like Norfolk, even though it is a military city, and even though it is Navy. There's other branches. It's really more appropriate, I think. And it's more. You get a chance to go aboard modern ships, and we've been aboard a couple assault ships down there where it's somewhat different the way things are set up for like in land now, you know. It's kind of neat, actually. But it's nice. I don't go to every one because I guess some of the people, you know, I'm still young enough, but some of the people that were around with me are not around anymore. I don't want to have to deal with that. Maybe it's the reality of things, I don't know. You know, talking about the military, my wife and I have talked quite a bit recently, and she lost a brother in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, and I lost relatives too in the Air Force. I think if it's at all possible, anyone that gets out of high school and doesn't know what they want to do should go in the military. Not that I necessarily want to see them go in a combatant situation, but it gives them something to mold their life and to be able to handle situations in civilian life, which are nothing like military. And it helps them to be prepared should there be a need. And it gives them more, I think, more respect, not just for the military, but people in general, I think. there's a certain presumption, and I have 5 children. They're all adults and married. My one son was in the Coast Guard for 4 years. The other ones, which just was not the timing, whatever. But I think I would have told him, yeah. And he went on to become a mathematician and get his master's degree. You can go on to college and do whatever you want. It's a little bit of an interruption, but I think it's important. If you look at some of the other countries like that mandate that, such as the Israelis, you have the females, everybody's in the military, as I understand, and I think it's good. I do. I know there's some opposition to that and so forth, but I think that it's not just for security, it's for being part of something.
Is that part of what you feel you got out of your Navy experience?
I think so. I think that my ending up with the Waterfleet Arsenal, they treated me very well. Not just because, I guess we both treated each other well. We got along. They helped me with my education, my career. I had a lot of travel. I had a lot of relationships in the military. Not just the Navy, but the Army. Over a 30-year span, and I probably should have stayed in the military. I mean, the active military.
Why?
Because I think my wife mentions that. I just feel that way. I'm sort of drawn to it. I go on the internet, and I can pick up my ship there. I can look at the Japanese bomb in Pearl Harbor. I can look at anything that goes on, and I'm trying to find out more about my brother-in-law who was killed in the Battle of the Bulge, about the campaigns. I know there's the Hurtgen Force that was terrible, and I read the articles on that. But I was trying to do more. He was in Patton's Corps of Engineer group there, and I was trying to find out more about it, to break it down. Because ironically, he was killed on November 11th, 1944, armistice. It's kind of a day that you sort of remember things, reported KIA. Why? I don't know. I'm just drawn to it. I have a lot of material. I find articles and I'm just browsing through the library. It helps me relate to the other branches of the service, which a lot of them have sacrificed a lot more than what I ever did or had to, but yet, I don't know. My one son in the Coast Guard, he was enlisted, but he had a chance to go to the Coast Guard Academy. I told him, go for it, but he didn't want to go. He was in 4 years, and did fine, but I guess he just wanted to become a civilian. Of course, I'm talking about him, not me. I guess my thought was probably live my life through my son, and that's not the way to do it, He's got to have his own life. But
Absolutely. Tell me a little more about what it was like to be on a destroyer off North Korea.
Well, it's very cold. You had to wear a lot of foul weather gear. It's very dangerous, very slippery, and what it was like, what a day was like?
Yeah, what your day was like, what your living conditions.
Well, the living conditions, the sleeping quarters were very compacted. In fact, you had like a rack, they used to refer to them rack, they folded down, and you had like 2 or 3 levels, and and it was very close quarters. The mess hall was, I don't know, maybe 25 foot by 40 foot, and you had to move a couple hundred people there through in an hour and a half. The cooks and commissary and so forth. I was a radioman. Not first off, I ended up being a radioman after the Korean episode there, on the way back to the States, coming back, the enlisted were all interviewed to find a specialty that they could start preparing for some training. And I had interest in communications, and I became what they call it a striker. In other words, or an apprentice. So I learned sending and receiving Morse code, and setting up all the transmitters, receivers, and classified, and also assisted commissioned officers. And well, over in Korea, I helped to destroy the operational things in the coding machines, ciphers. They had to really take care of that stuff and weight it down to throw it over the side, and that's what that was sort of like. And of course, we became operational. Well, I became a petty. I went to school for a communication school for 4 months, and when I come back to the States, that was I forgot to mention that, and then became a petty officer. And I was recommended to go up another level, and if I was going to stay in. But of course, I was thinking about going on to college. Of course, I could have done it in there too, but it just was a little bit not in my mindset at the time then. The day was, you had certain duties in the radio shack, or I think maybe when I first went in, I had things to do with cleaning up the ship, preparing it, and doing that. Every enlisted person had to be involved in taking care of a space, and not only their sleeping quarters, but I mean the ship itself. And but once you got into a specialty, your time that's where you were needed and so forth. And there was always training. We used to have a lot of not just with other ships or different operations, whether it be we'd go out and even when we weren't in the combat area, we were always shooting at targets, sleds that were being, or sleeves that were being dragged across, that we would use our 40 and 20 millimeter, or we were shooting at sleds with our 5-inch, and then we had 5 torpedoes aboard, and we used to launch those without the warheads, obviously, or making inactive at other destroyers or other ships, and we did a lot of work with the British and when we was on anti-submarine warfare. That was kind of interesting. They were being attacked by them in a certain mode. You're being pinged on, the sonar and so forth. I didn't know that was, if you weren't on duty, then you had time off, to read or write home. And in the evenings that you didn't have duty, you would watch some movies. Usually you're about a month old. They'd be flown in from the carriers and come across. And we didn't have any doctors on board. What we had was a pharmacist mate who had to be able to take care of most things. And if you had a problem, they had to use a boatswain's chair to take you over to a carrier or a battleship where they had physicians aboard. That would be for an appendectomy or something like that. Or there were situations like that. Or a helicopter would land on your fantail, pick you up. I remember one incident. I had some dental problems. As a matter of fact, I have to go to the VA hospital once in a while because I have some service-related dental problems. And we were over. Was on one of the cruises there, and I had to go to Trieste, and there was an U.S. Army, I don't know if it was a base or a small group there, but they had dentists, and I had to have my dental work done, and I was taken over in an Army Jeep and back very quickly, because the year before there was a lot of, it was on May Day, and there was a lot of grenades going off no matter where you went. If you went to a cafe or you went to a place that looked very innocent, children were told to pull the pin out of a grenade or something, throw it under a table, and there'd be servicemen there thinking about home drinking and things of that nature. And Generally, we didn't have problems. Oh, funny is, got to tell you this. This is really funny. The Korean cruise on the way back to the States, after we came through the Suez Canal, we went to Ras, Saudi Arabia. Well, the Arabs for the most part, do not drink alcohol, and they know we do. So they were kind enough to, without breaking their violations, to get beer and other things. The officers, that was for the enlisted, and officers too if they wanted. But the officers were going to go to Naples. They were going to be airlifted, and the Kirk Douglas was over there, and Evergy Robson. They were making movies, and Betty Hutton was over there. Well, the story goes that the 4 destroyers, the commanding officers, there are 3-stripe full commanders, and the flag officers usually a 4-stripe or captain, or they refer to him as a commodore. And our commodore had been all through World War II, a lot of different. He had really been through it, and he was dancing with Betty Hutton, the jitterbug. And if anybody can remember Betty Hutton, she's still around, but she twirled him around, and he went off tangentially from that, and he broke his leg. And they didn't tell anybody about it for about 2 months. And he even laughed about it, but it came back, and it was a little embarrassing, I guess. But it was just something, things happen. The different places visited. One of the cruises we went to, if you ever see the movie The Dirty Dozen, and we've all seen it at least 15 or 20 times anyway, Anyway, it's pronounced, I believe, Nantes or Nantes, France. It's in Cherbourg area of France. When we were in different NATO relations with France, they had an army base there, regular army, and they were housed in a big castle, and it looked just like that. And it was treated like that because it's got these Gothic windows. And we had a big party there, and we're all drinking cognac. I got pictures of it. We were all stoned after about 5 minutes, and everybody's shaking everybody else's hand for the 15th time. But anyway, these windows, every Gothic window had a machine gun in. I don't mean at this part. When the Allies came in that area, I think there were French or Polish, excuse me, French or Polish commandos that had escaped and gone back to Great Britain. They were part of the contingent which were going to take this over. They'd come in this courtyard, and those machine guns just cut a lot of them down. Of course, they had to get in there. And you can see pockmarks where these windows just had a machine gun set up and it just traversed like that. That's all it did. And these guys the commandos try to rake it and get grenades in, whatever they had to do to get it. They overcome it. But there's a cemetery like 3,500. Wow, it's something really grabbed you. And that is very peaceful when I was there. But if you go back and you think about it, there was a lot of activity going on. That was sort of interesting, not from the death, but I mean from historical point of view. Japan in the Far East was nothing like what it is now. It was very, the economics I'm referring to. And it was sort of downtrodden and so forth. And the Mediterranean was hurt very bad. In fact, we used to, whenever we anchored someplace, I remember one Thanksgiving we took a lot of orphans aboard for the Thanksgiving dinner, and Christmas was the same way. We always seemed to be overseas around the holidays too. But I had a lot of that. The Korean situation, that was an episode during the Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. When are we going home? Yeah. Anything else? Bitter cold in Korea. Had to use face masks with slits in. Couldn't stay outside too long. Yes, I gotta say this. Storms. You're very vulnerable to go over the side of a ship. I don't care how well balanced you are. I had an incident, and I'll make this very brief, where on a destroyer, midships is the middle of the ship, and there's an opening there. It's also where there's a laundry. There's actual big laundries, machines that handle the whole crew's laundry. And when you go from the front of the, when you go from front to rear or fore to aft, you go through midships. And when we were off Korea, the darn wave come perpendicular to the ship, almost, and went right through. And it hits you, and you feel like, hey, this is fun. I mean, you're going through it, and you're like a feather. And all of a sudden, the ship is like this, and you're looking down, and you swear you can touch the water. You're over the lifeline, and somebody grabbed me right by my pants, by the small of the back, and held me. Says, "Come on." And I watched a 250-pound sack of laundry go like this with the weight. I weighed about 145. Wow. Well, you know what it made me think about it? It made me think about it years later when the Pueblo incident, when Commander Booker, when he was in that prison camp, there were people that had fallen off ships that were, Life magazine did a fine photographic reconnaissance, and there were people in there that were not from the Booker. They were from Naval. Oh yeah.
Well, hold on a second, let me see. Are we, you done? Good to go?
Nope, you got a new tape.
When we were over in Korea, we used to sink a lot of mines. We used Thompson M1s, usually the carbines, but some mines wouldn't sink, and they didn't know whether they were playing head games on us or what. And they tried everything. So we end up taking a mine aboard and tapping on it. That's sort of scary. And we're going to transfer it from our ship to a shores to installation where they want to do some intelligence work on it. It had the probes, but it could have been magnetic, it could have been acoustical, it could have been proximity, it could have been technology we didn't know about, but something very simple and inexpensive, that they've concocted. But the thing about it, they had it up on the torpedo deck right next to it and anchored down. We had rough seas, and they were listening with stethoscopes and any other sound monitoring device and anything magnetic instruments we couldn't pick up anything. But it was sort of, it wasn't scary then, but somebody says, what if this mine goes off? Right on the ship. Doesn't have to go anyplace, it's right here. Doesn't have to hit us. Mm-hmm. Forget about going through the Panama Canal, the tunnel locks, that's all over with. It's just flying us apart. I laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny then, It was just...
How did you feel about the Korean War?
How did I feel about it? Oh, you mean I felt that it was necessary to be in the service, to go over there. And I know at the time, I would say out of 10 guys I graduated out of high school, maybe 8 went in the service. 1 went to college, and maybe 2 go into college and 8 went in the service. But you know what happened? A lot of guys that went to college then, they started to go to college. They dropped out to go in the service after a year or 2 because everybody was going in. It was a need, and there was no big deal about you go in, that's it. I don't care what branch you go in, and you go in, or if you're drafted, you go in. I think it was necessary, and like I said, we had relatives killed in World War II, and I had some relation in England that were killed. And I had, one was a Spitfire pilot, and they were bombed out. We used to send food over to them. Remember during the, we used to send food, have to send food over to them, you know. And you know, we used to get input what it was like over there. So I can relate. It wasn't that long after World War II that some of the psychological feelings that you had, whatever it was, whether it was collecting tin foil, or as my wife said, they used to even collect, there was a time they used to collect the material out of pods for parachute harnesses to weave them together. They just didn't have the Japanese occupied the areas where a lot of the silk and everything they'd taken over. They knew what they were doing. They were trying to cut the supplies off, so we had to make do. So a lot of that World War II mentality, that's a positive. I mean, whatever you had to do, you still had sort of those thoughts, and it must have rubbed off as a child. I didn't have any problem about going in the service, or have any. I think it was very, very necessary. You know, I guess the hardest part for me in the service was that this time of year. I met my wife at a Christmas party. I was home from a long cruise, and we decided to get married. Not then and there, but I was home maybe, you know, back and forth for a few months, even though I went on small cruises. But we got married the following year, and I had to go overseas twice. That was the hardest part, doing the same thing. I think that's why I wanted. That's probably why I wanted to get out. And she wasn't pushing me or anything like that. It's just that I can see what it must be like to be married in the service now. I know where I live in Boston Spa, there's a lot of Naval personnel from West Milton, and we see them in church on Sunday. And I got to be, you know some, and during the submarine. I know one fellow who's been in 15 years, and he has 3 children, and he wants. And he's an officer too, but he doesn't know whether he wants to be in another 5 years. He's a very, very intelligent person, and I'm sure he'll go up in rank. It's just, you know, it's not that he's not doing all right financially, but he could probably be doing a heck of a lot better, you know, or do something different, you know, or at that time in his life maybe he feels it. So I think there's a lot of things that should be done for the military. To bring it up, not just pay, but I mean, I understand now they can contact through the computer, the internet. They can call home even when they're on a ship or overseas. That's beautiful, you know. But those things didn't exist before. It was all letters, and a lot of the letters we had were 3 months old, and if you're in a war area, they were stamped out, you know. I was looking at my wife's brother's letters and they were all lighted out.
Did you have trouble getting mail in Korea or Ukraine?
No. Fleet Post Office was very good. Of course, when you're with a task force, carriers, they had certain planes that would fly right back to probably Japan and then, you know, right over. There was one incident. One incident my mother told me about later. That she was watching on television. There used to be a program, John Cameron Swayze, the Camel News Caravan. They had pictures of us, and she saw the hull number of the ship when we were boom boom, you know. And we heard about it the next day. We were working with armies. I think it was the 5th Army or 5th or 7th. I don't remember. I don't really recollect that part of it. I read about it in a book, what it was, but they told us that what it was there was a hand grenade factory that we had done a number on, and there's about 800 of these Army personnel we used white phosphorus. We done a number on them. The next day they had 1,600 of them back there working, just like ants, you know. But they had told, the Stars and Stripes was in a newspaper about the effect we'd done. So we were, as far as militarily, I mean, we'd done what we were supposed to do. I think I was typical of an enlisted Navy person of that generation that just went in. I don't mean to imply, there was sad times, there were tight times, there was a lot of fun time, and there's a certain amount of grown-up times, I guess, or I guess it's grown up, or you get some perspective on maybe how nice it is back home. Or I think what I thought more than anything else is I wish they could have the feelings that I had to see how good they have it when I went into some of the countries to see what devastation was from World War II. And that really hit me, you know, because if you have nothing to compare with, you're still worrying about what you don't have rather than what you do have. That impressed me in the military. You would never have that unless you were overseas.
So the military sort of changed your worldview.
It changed my worldview. You know, I had one of the cruises, I think it was in Northern Europe. Like I say, I had relatives that were in England. I tried to get to see them. And we landed in Plymouth, which I believe, looking at the clock, I think it's probably 8 or 9 o'clock position, something in terms of the British Isles, I think, somewhere. And they were like heading, I'd have to head due east. They were maybe only 150 miles in a farming area. I shouldn't say that, I really don't know. It seemed like it was that. They were in Devonshire, and that's where I was going to go. And I tried to get to see them, and I got within 10 miles, and I only had a 48-hour path. I'd never make it. There was hardly any trains. There was like one phone in the area that was public, even though it was just like associated with the local government. People would pass the word on, your relatives coming or something like this. I got that close, but yet I couldn't make it. Well, what happened is years later I found out that they come over here and they saw some relatives, and I missed them, but they apologized for it. But to show how easy we have communications, whether it be the telephone or cars or whatever it is, you have a lot here. Now obviously the world's changed with the internet and a lot of other inventions and so forth. But I'm very impacted by what people will do to make a living, to survive. And as far as health, we had a lot of, before any port that we went into, we used to get, every person had a 2 or 3 page handout. It had the currency rate, the political situation, the police, the hospitals, the diseases. It's like watching reading a vital statistics. It had maps, it had certain words. We had handbooks that we hand out that if there was a difference, we had a problem in communicating. Certain words you could use, like police or restroom facilities or things like that. But it was so different from over here that even though it didn't look different in some respects, it was different. And to get around to do certain basic things, you had to be able to use this information. That was so prevalent from previous devastation wars that it affected you. Like after a while, you say it's too much of a trouble to go over here, or you want to go to one port where it's almost like one place where it's like home. The ports we selected were not necessarily. Oh, we did go to the Riviera. Yeah, we had some nice. We'd go places that were good for NATO, good for relationships, militarily as well as politically. And even then, you know, it was always that way. I don't know whether is there anything else that you can think of? You have some good. You don't ask me too many questions, but
no,
you know how to push the button, and I trying to eke out some other things because there was a lot that went on.
Perhaps you mentioned something about growing up experiences.
Growing up experience.
Yes, when you were in the Navy. Good times, some bad times, times that perhaps helped you grow up or matured you?
Well, when you had to have the responsibility, first off, for loading ordnance, and they use that analogy, the soft spot of a baby's head. That's what it is. You better think about it like that no matter what you do with that projectile. And that made you react in a certain way that you're dealing with lethality, and you better find a way of dealing with that. That incident, I guess, we used to having to hit an awful lot of storms. Everybody gets seasick. I don't care who you are. And well, I forgot to tell you, when we left the round the world, the Korean cruise, it was really a circumnavigation. We left Newport, Rhode Island. We were off Cape Hatteras going down. In my recollection, there were 3 or 4 that were swept over, not on our ship, but one of our other ship, and they all had K-Park life jackets on, and they drowned. The last they saw them, they were in the water like this, all 18 years old. They never had a chance. This went to the chief of naval operations, and they really blasted him, I guess. Why these men topside? Why this? It was so bad going through this, and this is like a week after you're leaving a calm, like Rhode Island. We literally lived on bologna sandwich and black coffee for about 3 days, 3 meals, because they couldn't take in the cafeteria to sit you down, and it wouldn't hold any, the liquid material, and or other than coffee, and you could handle a mug, You just had to deal. That's sort of a growing up experience, you're saying about growing up. When you do your laundry, when you take your showers, when you get time off, what kind of food you can eat, how to eat fried potatoes 3 meals in a row. The shots were easy. 4 in one arm, 4 in the other, going over. They were easy. They were for every kind of imaginable thing you could think of. And what I'm talking about, is this going to be edited? I presume it's going to be edited.
No, we don't generally edit.
Well, okay, well.
It's all right, you can feel free to talk about anything.
When we were over in Japan at the time, that area, there's a certain number of people might want to go over on Liberty and get involved, and they better watch out, because they had, they used to have a lot of briefings, medical briefings, and photographs of situations where people got involved, and how these people, you might say they have things comparable to HIV now, and whatever. So, and they didn't have any cure for these things at the time, or they had any way of, I think with the antibiotics they have now, they probably have, but they didn't even have names for these things. At least that's what we were told. But anyway, it's a good thing to make you wake up, I guess. And there was, I got to be careful, because I can go out. There's some funny situations in that.
Tell us whatever you like.
About the commanding officer?
Please.
Oh, I don't know whether I should about that. That might be too personal. I think he's a good commanding officer. He was a father for... every commanding officer I have, it was good. I guess the first one is sort of makes an impression with you. He was a family man, and he didn't act like a father, but he acted like somebody that really could put you on the straight path and direct you. And it's fair. The other junior officers were good too. They all were good, all the right down through the end. Oh, we that first cruise we made over to Korea, we had crossed the equator, and of course when you cross the equator, you get to become a shellback, and they go through a ceremony. And I have all those things, I don't know if the documents. they don't beat you up, but they make life miserable for you. You have a day, it's like a hell day thing. And they had some people dress up like women and with a lipstick on and everything, and then some they paddle excessively, and a lot of garbage they're thrown in, and sometimes they're dunked over, say, not thrown over without a life ring, but they had an incident on, it wasn't our ship, but it was one of them in the division. I was trying to recollect. We were in the South Pacific there on our way over, and we hadn't gotten quite over to Japan yet. But there was a time at the certain meridians and certain time when we could take time out for the you know, what was going to happen to us. It took a whole day. It was a whole day long. What had happened is, so it's so warm out there. You get a beautiful sunburn. Oh, what a team you get. But you get it so badly that without you realizing it, excuse me, you can fall over the side. You pass out. You're not hurting at all, and you might not be found right away, if at all. And they had an incident where one of the individuals fell over, and they picked up on it. And I guess they threw the life rings to him, and they were rotten. So they immediately ships went into lifeguard station. They're going like this, paralyzed, and they go like this, come right around, they're going to come around. They come on, out come the Thompsons, out come the BARs and the carbines and the binoculars and machine, 20 millimeter, everything, because the sharks, anything, because all kinds of predatory fish around. Fortunately, the sea was like calm as glass. Really, it was very calm. He'd ingested seawater, and it had, you know, he wasn't going to die, but he was sick for a couple of days. They were lucky they got a hold of him, because he couldn't take care of himself. Not that he couldn't swim, but he's sort of semi-conscious, you know. But there's situations like that happen. Just the military, you don't always have to be shot. You don't have to have a shell explode. You can have things happen. People fall off during the night when they're going from. There's other things that happen, incidences where people want to get even with somebody. And I don't know what I want to go into that, but I know of a particular incident, and it happens in all the military. Or, you know, for something that they perceive is a threat to them, and what a way to do it, you know, some harm. And there was a particular incident. There always is, you know. But that's sort of not the standard fare, you know. That sort of wakes you up. You're vulnerable, you know. Everybody's vulnerable, you know. It's something to see a battleship fire a 16-inch salvo. It's like seeing a Toyota. The round weighs as much as a Toyota, small Toyota. You can actually see the round. It's visible. I'm told. I didn't see it. I'm told you can see it. You know, if you could try, if you're ready for it. Mm-hmm. But what it must be on the receiving end.
Did you know what you were firing at generally when you were firing shore bombardment?
Yeah.
They tell you what the targets were?
Well, they told us one thing was hand grenade factory. Another one was the the communists, the North Koreans. What they had done is they had achieved after World War II. They achieved a lot of the German 88 millimeter cannons. They went from Russia, or whatever it means, into North Korea and China, particularly North Korea. Excuse me, and the North Koreans at first weren't too up on some of the things for camouflage, but they got very good at it after. And a lot of the firing that would happen toward ships, or, you know, out to sea, would be like a mountain, that's a mountain, but if there's trap doors that go down, and 2 or 3 88s fire, and they close up, and where'd that come from? The other thing was like trains. They had the 88s on railroad cars, and I don't know what the range of an 88 is, effective range, maybe 8 to 10 miles. Okay, they'd run them up on the railroad cars, maybe 20 of them, and they'd fire in mass like that, and they had a lot of them, and that's where they got dangerous. Like one of our sister ships, the Hyman, took some minor damage on it. Nothing where anybody got hurt, but it did penetrate, you know, and do some damage. The other, we were told about hand grenade factories. We were told that it was a marshalling yard that had been destroyed, and that we were going to have, even though there were, was being rebuilt, we had to use white phosphorus. We got to stop this, you know, because it had an impact on what was going on. And there was another episode. There was a religious temple, just the guys that had munitions or hand grenades. I'm talking about large capacity for a whole regiment or whatever, you know. And these were spotted out by the Army. The Army would tell, and the 3 South Korean officers that we had aboard, as I understand, they had to leave in a hurry before they come back to the United States, wherever they were. But they were very familiar with the terrain, the coastal areas, and the tides, and the shoals, and the political, and from child. And so these people were briefed. That was sort of unusual to have them aboard, but I can recollect them being in our combat, our CIC area radar and fire control, and we had the charts are out there, and they were using the different fire control mechanisms and giving the fire control people the coordinates, so forth, and with the radar. Because that was right next to the radio shack, right in the same general area. We used to pick up a lot of, we picked up submarines. We had some Soviets and others. We also picked up a lot of you pick up whales and large, you can discriminate between fish, large schools of fish. But we picked up a lot of Soviets, and we went to general quarters, armed. We had everything, even the depth charges ready. We had picked up, we had some, on that crew, we just had the regular depth charges, the ones that the K, they shoot off, and the ones that roll off. But when we come back to the States on another crew before, we had hedgehogs, which put a pattern out. They were like, on both sides we had those. They're sort of neat. Of course, that we didn't get a chance to use those, but we had tracked Soviet subs. It's very common, I guess. You know, my son, Coast Guard, had the same thing. You track them right off of Norfolk, or between Norfolk and what's the place in South Carolina you go? Myrtle Beach, that area. They're off station. You know, they're in international waters, and they even got them. They know what class they are and everything else. So we had the same scenario. You know, we didn't ever have any fire at us, but we had MiGs come in for the carriers, tried it, but didn't have a chance. You know, because we were always second guessing them. We had the firepower there. That's really something to see those carriers launch, take off. Sometimes we'd get up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just before first light. They're over there and they're getting ready with their napalm or whatever ordnance they're using, getting ready. And like I say, what they would do, what the North Koreans would do, when a pilot was shot down, and they knew he was either injured from crashing, or he had shrapnel or bullet wounds, or he was just out of it, whatever. He could have even had a heart attack. Things happen like that. He's in the water, and they know he's alive. They want to use him like bait to draw the destroyers in, because the bigger ships are out. The destroyers are always will go in closer. And if you get in close enough, they'll take a chance at you with their short batteries, and they would use the pilots as game, or bait. And of course, what would happen is they started firing the pilot. Usually would buy it because they let go. And if he wasn't dead then, probably after. Then we had episodes where we had picked up a couple of pilots that were dead, you know, and so forth.
Well, I think we're getting down on
Yeah.
tape, so.
That's essentially what it was like. I don't know. There are a lot of other things. I guess we had a lot of nighttime watches, and there's no really very little relaxation when you're over there, unless you're out about 25 miles.
Mhm.
Because they would come along with sampans, and they had sampans with false bottoms in, which would put mines out during the night, and they mixed them in with their fishing fleet. We'd have to blow them up or whatever, take prisoners and that type of thing too.
Any final thoughts before we conclude?
No, I'm very pleased to have been selected. I kind of felt maybe we'd be talking today, and another time there might be, if I had something to say, I'd be videotaped. But it's nice happened, and it's been a pleasure with the three of you gentlemen. I hope I've been of some.
Oh, yeah.
It's fairly vivid, some of the things, you know. There's a lot of funny things too that happened, and that's what I try to remember.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have some paperwork we need to do.
Sure.